Hi friends, welcome to our channel. You have seen in the last video that we have covered till test analysis, and like until now, for in the test process, the test activities that we have covered was test planning P, then test monitoring and control M, then test analysis A. Now, uh, as we are following this short term PMA, the next one is D, test planning, monitoring, analysis. This one is design. So as I told you in test analysis, we analyze each and every test basis, work product, and like we come to know that what we need to test, what should we exactly test. And here I am also summarizing for you guys like a work product for each activity. So now we are moving to test design. So test design, actually in test design, now after test analysis we have test conditions. Now based on test conditions we make our uh, we make our test cases, but actually that is high level test cases. That is not a specific test case for any specific requirement, but high level test case that can be used in the other modules for the testing as well. So during test design the test conditions are elaborated in high level test cases. Like it is not exactly the test cases that you need for that particular test case, like it is not is data specific, but it's on a high level sets of high level test cases and other test where test where normally is a combination of test cases which you provide to the maintenance team after the delivery of your product if they have to maintain something, so they know the stuff. So test design, so test analysis was what to test, like what we have to test, while test design answers the question how to test. Here we tells each and everything. Like for example, in test analysis we have written some test conditions, not just raw test conditions, that for every requirement we have a test condition. But in test design actually we design high level test cases. Like high level test cases could be, for example, we write some test case number one, and we write like what we are expecting here, what will be our expected result. So then these test cases can be used in some other tests. We will not write, like for example, for unsigned integer 8, let's say we are checking the values at 0, 1 and 254 and 255. We are not writing exactly the data for the test cases, but we are writing high level test cases that are not specific to any data. They can be reused in the upcoming test cases as well in some other modules. So test design include the major activities: designing and prioritizing test cases and set of test cases. Actually here we design test cases based on the test conditions which what we have got from test analysis, and then we prioritize the test cases. We tell them this one is of high priority, so we have to run this test case first, then this has a second priority, we have to run this. Even during test design we identify necessary data to support that condition and test cases. Like we don't write the test data exactly, but actually we identify like what test data will we need, what will be our test data that we need to that we need to test our some, you can say, test conditions. Then designing the test environment and identify required infrastructure and tools. Then during test design we should also know about the test environment. We design a test environment. For example, you have an app which you want to test in Android and for example iOS, in both of them. Then you have to design the test environment. Now you have to be sure that either you need to test this app, for example, with VLAN or with 4G network you have, or 5G network, whatever you have. So actually you think about the environment, and then maybe you have some actually you have some test preconditions, test steps, and you write everything during test design. You design some high level test cases, and then based on that test case I will quickly show you. For example, if you have test case, uh, it is based on test condition which you have already seen in test analysis step. Then after this test condition normally you have like after test case you have some precondition, what conditions you need before executing this test, then what is your expected output, what will be the test steps. So actually you write like a high level test design. You make your environment you design your environment, you identify which tools you will need to implement the test. Then you capture bi-directional traceability between a test basis, test condition, and test cases. As we have seen in analysis that there was a traceability between test basis and test conditions. But now based on that test condition, we have written some test cases in test design activity. So now they all will be traceable. Like test basis is traceable with test condition, and then it is traceable with test cases. The elaboration of test condition into test cases and set of test cases during test design often involve using test techniques. Actually test, you don't need to worry about test techniques. This we will see in chapter number 4, black box testing, white box testing, and some experience based testing. So actually test conditions then are transformed into test cases, and then we write some set of test cases, like we merge them together. So it is done during test design. As with the test analysis, test design may also result in identification of similar type of defects in the test basis. Like in test analysis, you were analyzing that if you are missing some requirement. Even during test design, if you have some test conditions which you have finalized during test analysis, you can refine them during test design. You can find defect in them. Also, as with test analysis, the identification of defect during test design is an important potential benefit. Like test design also support you. Like along with test analysis, you can also during test design you can also figure out those issues and problems with test conditions which you have finalized during test analysis. Now I will quickly jump to the work product of test design. So what are the work product of test design? Test design result in test cases and set of test cases to exercise the test condition define and test analysis. I will again give you a short overview. Test analysis, you have written test conditions. Then based on that, during test design, you have written your high level test cases, and you have, like, if same test cases of same category, then you have arranged them in a set. You say it is test case number 1. For example, login, I have already given the example. So these are the 4 tests to log in into an app or to authentify the user. So you will exercise the test conditions and define in test analysis. It is often a good practice to design high level test cases without concrete values. As I told you, you don't write the concrete values. You don't tell that I have to test, for example, float, I have to test string. You only write that I have to test this test condition. You don't exactly tell that this will be my value 1 2. This you will do in test implementation, when you will be finally before one step before the test execution. But here in test design, try to write high level test cases without concrete values for input data and expected result. You don't write the concrete values for expected data and input data. You only tell this is my test condition that I have to log in, so expected result that login successful. But you don't tell that login successful, for example, in this app, in Facebook, in Twitter, in this you don't tell the concrete data, but a high level test design. Such high level test cases are reusable across multiple test cycle with a different concrete data. During test design, you made high level test cases, and then this can be used for different kind of test data during the testing, sorry, life cycle. This we will see in upcoming chapter, while still adequately documenting the scope of test cases. Ideally, each test case is bi-directionally traceable to the test condition it covers. This we have already seen. In test analysis, we have test conditions, and in test design we write test cases, high level test cases based on those test conditions. So actually then in test design also results in the design or identification of necessary test data. It never gives you concrete test data, but actually it identifies and design the test data. It tells you that this will be my test data, not the concrete. the design of test environment. Like you design the test environment, you tell like this will be my requirement, this will be my environment where I need to test, because sometime your product is to be in the production line at 40 degrees centigrade, for example. So you have to simulate the environment. So during test design, you design the test environment, like you finalize the things about this. The identification of infrastructure and tools, you also tell like which tools do I need to execute the test. So you also plan this thing during test design. You are designing everything, you are in the designing phase, not in the implementation phase, but you are designing them. Through the extent to which these results are documented varies significantly. So like the results are like they are finalized and documented in a different way in each company, but this is the main stuff. So for your like here we are creating a table. So now step number 4 is test design. Right now, like till now, until now we are done with test planning, monitoring, and test analysis. Now the fourth step is PMAD, test design. And you know, in test design, actually what exactly as a work product we have, this we have seen that based on test test conditions in test analysis, here we have some test cases, or you can say high level test cases. And then even we we finalize, or we come to know about our test data as well. Like we don't write the concrete values, but we identify which test data we will need. So until now we are done with the 4 test activities. Now the fifth test activity is test implementation. In test analysis we have a question, actually what we need to test. This we have seen already, what to test. And then in test design we have seen how to test, like what will be our tools, environment, test cases, everything. And then in test implementation, a very important question is, during test implementation the test where necessary for test execution is created and completed. Here we test where is a set of your test cases. Here you create and complete your test where, including sequencing the test cases into procedure. In actually in test implementation you also define your test procedures, like how your test will be proceeded, and like how in what way or in what procedure your test cases will go. So test design answer the question how to test, while test implementation answer the question, do we have now everything in place to run the test? Do we have environment ready? Do we have concrete data? Do we have test infrastructure and tools? Do we have well defined test cases? Everything this all comes under test implementation. Test analysis, you finalize the test conditions, you review the documents, you find some ambiguity and some discrepancies or some inconsistencies in the requirement. During test design, based on those test conditions, you make some high level test cases, you identify your data, you think about your testing environment, you design it on your paper, or you design the infrastructure of your testing environment, and then you decide about the tools. But during test implementation you need to be sure you have test wheres, you have final test conditions, test cases with concrete data, and you have test procedures as well, that how you need to how you need to proceed your test cases. So the major test implementation activities are developing and prioritizing test procedure. Here you need to prioritize the test procedure. Now you have the test procedure, and you know the how the test process will go. Now you need to develop and prioritize the test procedure. Tell that this procedure will go first, then you have to proceed with the test case number 2, test case number 3, and potentially creating automated scripts. Maybe for some kind of testing we need to automate our testing process. We need to write some scripting, we need to script something. So for that, this step, automatic scripting, if you are planning to automate your test cases, then this will done in test implementation. Just remember this: creating test suites from the test procedure, and if any, automated test script. For example, what is test suite? Actually test suite is a combination of different test cases belonging to the same category. For example, you are saying my system is safety critical, and here I am testing some safety related safety testing. So this test suite will be named safety test suite, and all test cases which are related to safety will be in this test suite. And then you like you prioritize them, like this test suite will be run first, this will be run second. So this test suites are created from your test procedures, and if any automated script, you have to add them as well. Arranging test suites within test execution schedule. Now you have test suites ready, you have put your test cases in the test suites, you have your test procedure. Now you have to schedule your execution of the test cases, like when you will run your test cases in a way that result in efficient test execution. Like what are the dependencies, and when will your test cases will run and execute, everything you plan here. Building test environment. In test design, you have designed test environment, now you build it, you finally run the environment, including potentially test harness, service visualization, simulators, and other infrastructure items. Like test harness is a term. I will quickly this top down approach and a top down and bottom up approach we will see in chapter number 2, but I will clarify here what is test harness. For example, you have module A ready, but actually this module A has some calls or has some functions from module B and module C. Let's say like here is the module which is calling some function from B, some function from A, and some of its own function. But let's say B and C are not ready. So what you will do, there is a term called stub. You will create a dummy file. It is called dummy file, and you will call from here you will stub all the functions of these two in a dummy file, and you will run your system. It is called test harness. It is called top down approach. One is bottom approach. For example, you have module B and A, they both are B and C, they both are ready, but they need to be called from a different module which is A. A is not ready. It is called top bottom up approach. You are going from bottom to up, it was top down. So in this case, A is a driver. You write a driver, and driver will call this function. But in top down approach, your top was ready, but your bottom was not ready, so you have to stub them. These are two different terms. It is not related to ISTQB, but I will explain you when it will the topic, like it's of more interest for us. Okay, and like during we test environment, if we have dependencies and those modules are not ready, we create harness for them. We create some service visualization. If we need some, we have to simulate some networks, simulators we need, and infrastructure. Preparing test data. Now here we will prepare concrete test data. In test design, actually we had test data, but that was high level test, and ensuring it is properly loaded in a test environment. Now everything needs to be ready because the next step is test execution. So in test implementation, we need to prepare concrete test data and load it in the test environment because we are going to execute them. Verifying and updating bidirectional traceability between test bases, test condition, test cases, test procedure, and test suites. Like as I told you, in test analysis we had test conditions. Based on that, we made our test cases in test design. Then what we did, based on those test conditions, test cases, we had our test procedures, like how will we proceed with the test, and then we put all of these test cases based on this test procedure in a test suite. So everything is ready. Test design and test implementation tasks are often combined. This is very important point. Like in some companies, these both tasks, test design and implementation, are done together, like they are overlapped. In exploratory testing, as I told you, exploratory testing, what is exploratory testing? In exploratory testing, actually you have an app ready, you have product ready, and you on the runtime you think that this should I should test in this way. You generate your test cases and you run it on your app, play with it, and you explore it. Okay, and other type of experience-based testing, test design and implementation may occur and may be documented as a part of test execution. Like as I told you, in experience-based testing, exploratory testing, or other experience-based, you don't plan anything. You don't have test analysis. You don't have test design, but you directly execute them, and during execution, you document what test cases you have designed, because it's a kind of experience based testing. We will see this in detail in upcoming chapter. Exploratory testing may be based on test charter. As I told you, you have some test conditions. It is known as test charter, which was produced after test analysis. And exploratory tests are executed immediately as they are designed and implemented. Like you have the product on the runtime, you define some test conditions, you run them, execute them, like, and then you say, yeah, this app is working properly. And this experience based techniques normally we use when we have time pressure. So now we will quickly jump to the work product of this test implementation. For test implementation work products, what are the products of test implementation? Test implementation work product are test procedures and sequencing of those test procedures. You have test procedures now, and you have to sequence them, like which procedure will run first. You have test suites and you have execution schedule. These all are the work product of test implementation. Ideally, once test implementation is complete, achievement of coverage criteria established in the test plan can be demonstrated via bidirectional traceability between the test procedures and specific element of test basis through the test cases and test conditions. Like now you have set, like based on your test basis, you have some requirements. This requirement will be cross checked or verified with test condition 1, this with test case 2, this with test case 3. So now after implementation, you have some bidirectional traceability between test procedure and specific element of test basis, and then you tell this test procedure actually is fulfilling this requirement of test basis, and this test procedure contain this test cases and test conditions. So like we are every step we are adding some more thing in the traceability. In some cases, test implementation involve creating work product using or used by tools such as service visualization and automated test script. Even sometime you have to automate your testing. So in that case, actually you create your work product. You type some scripting. You do some scripting. You write some script to automate your test step. So as I told you, work product can be anything, requirements, your code. So actually then during test implementation, you are writing your scripts, you are writing your services visualization, you are doing some simulations. So that is also a work product which could be a part of test implementation. Test implementation also may result in the creation and verification of test data. Yeah, here you specify the concrete test data, and even you develop the test environment. The completeness of documentation of the data or environment verification results may vary significantly. Like actually the completeness may depend from project to project, but normally during test implementation phase we should have a concrete data and environment 100% ready. The test data serve to assign concrete values to input and expected result over test cases. Such concrete values, together with explicit direction about the use of concrete values, turn high-level test cases into executable low-level test cases. Like in test design, we had high-level test cases without any concrete data, but now we have a concrete data, so we have a low-level test cases. The same high-level test cases may use different test data when executed on different releases of a test object. Maybe during the next cycle of your software release, you need different test data. For example, currently you are testing it with integer. Maybe during the test release, you have changed the variable type to float. So then those high-level test cases which you have designed during test design phase, you can, during test implementation, you can give the concrete data to them. They are reusable. The concrete expected result which are associated with the concrete data are identified by using test oracle. Okay, test oracle actually is also experience. Like with test oracle, you can say this will be the output of my product. So they are telling the concrete expected results which are associated with concrete test data are identified using a test oracle. So like based on the concrete test data, you can tell the concrete expected result. if you don't have the concrete test data, you have a high level test data, then you can only give the high level expected result. But when you have the concrete expected results which are associated with concrete test data, they are identified by using test oracle. Oracle is a like you are thinking about how your test will behave. In exploratory testing, some test design and implementation of a product may be created using test execution. Like as I told during test execution, as I told you, in exploratory testing, we have the product ready. We don't have any analysis, we don't have any design. We directly run the test cases and then we document those test cases that we have executed these test cases that came into our mind as per our past experience. So though the extent to which exploratory tests and their traceability to specific element of the test basis are documented may vary significantly. So test conditions are defined in test analysis, may be further refined in test implementation. Like those conditions which you have defined during test analysis, they can be refined during test design, and even they can be refined during your test implementation phase. So right now we have seen the work product of our test implementation phase. So I will quickly like we are just writing here. So PMA DI, test implementation phase, which is our test implementation phase. And what we have in test implementation phase, we have test procedures, then we have test suites. Test suites contain different test cases which we have developed during test design, and a same set of test cases belong to the same test suite. And then we have test execution schedule as well. Test execution, I am writing in a short way, test execution schedule. So right now we are done with planning, monitoring and control, test analysis, test design, test implementation. Now we will quickly jump to the sixth test activity, which is test execution. So now comes the real testing, which is test execution. So during test execution, actually you have, like, now you are executing your test cases. Now it's a real testing activity, you can say dynamic testing activity. So during test, so we are done with planning, PMA, monitoring and control, analysis, D, test design, I, implementation, and now we are on E, execution. Then we'll go to completion. So test execution. During test execution, test suites are run in accordance with the test execution schedule. You had a plan, you had a schedule, and then you had test suites. Now you will run them. So test execution includes the following major activities: recording the IDs and the version of test item or test object and test where. Like you tell them this is a test ID. Like for example, I am testing it on the software version first release 1.1. What is the test object, which tool I am using, and what are my test suites or test where. Like a combination of test cases. Executing test either manually or by using execution tool. Like during test execution, either you run them manually or you have some well defined test execution tools. Normally from the different companies we have different execution tools. You can Google it, we will see them in the last chapter, which is about the tools, chapter number 6. During test execution, we compare actual result with the expected result, and here we decide either our test cases have detected a failure or not. Analyzing anomalies to establish their likely causes. Like failure may occur due to defects in the code, but false positive also may occur. Like actually here during when you are inside the test execution phase, so actually you analyze about, as I told you, about the false positive and false negative thing. So like you tell about the deviation from the expected behavior. The term which we use is anomaly, is deviation from the expected behavior. You analyze the deviation from the expected behavior, like what was the cause. Was it a real fault due to defect code, or maybe it could be like false positive. Then you report defects based on the failure. If you found some failure, then you report it back to the developer and ask him to debug and fix this fault. logging the outcome of test execution. What was the outcome? Either your test was pass, fail, or blocked because of some missing requirement, you also log it. Repeating test activities either as a result of action taken from a anomaly or as a part of the plan testing. Maybe you have to repeat it again and again, a kind of like you found a bug, you have given it back to the developer, he fixed it, you retest it. So maybe corrected test, confirmation testing, or regression testing. This we will see in detail in next chapter. Even here during execution, you verify and update bidirectional traceability between test bases, condition, test cases, procedure, and test results. So here you confirm everything, that for every requirement from test basis, I had a test condition, I had a test case that was in a procedure, and test result is also verifying it. So now we will jump to the work product of test execution. The test execution work products include documentation of status of individual test cases or test procedure. You tell like what are the status of the test cases. Either they are ready to run, are they passed, are they failed, blocked, or they are skipped, maybe planned for the next release. Then defect reports. What is defect report? Also known as incidence report. We will see in chapter number 5 in detail about this. Like if you found some defect, then you have to give a feedback to the developer that here is the defect. So you have to identify like on the which software version was this tested, what was the requirement ID, what was the environment. You have to tell everything. Documentation about which test item, test object, tools, testware were involved in testing. So test execution contain everything about testing. Ideally, once test execution is complete, the status of each element of test basis can be determined and reported via bidirectional traceability with the associated test procedure. Like when test execution is done, you can tell about each element of test basis, that it is tested in this procedure, it was tested in this procedure. You can tell everything. For example, we can say which requirement have passed all planned test, which requirement have failed test or have defect associated with them, and which requirement have planned test still waiting to be run. Like you can test about the procedures, that this was my test procedure, it was fulfilling this requirement, it is passed, it is failed, and it is blocked because of the developer activity or whatsoever. This enable verification that the coverage criteria have been met and enable the reporting of the test result in terms that are understandable to the stakeholder. Like based on that, you can tell the stakeholder, because stakeholder or user only knows either my requirements are completed, developed, and tested or not. So based on your requirement, your traceability, you can tell them, yeah, this requirement is already tested, this has not been tested because of the development activity, there was some problem. So actually based on test execution, you can tell them about like the test cases and what are their status. So now here PMADIE, sixth is test execution. And in test execution, actually what we have, as I told you, we have status of test cases, like of test procedures. You can whatever you want to say, are they passed or failed or whatsoever. And you also have a work product which is defect report. So PMADIE is done. Now the last phase of the testing activity is test completion. We will go to the last activity, which is test completion. What is test completion? When your test is completed, maybe the whole project, or when you are working in an agile environment, then first iteration is done. So what does exactly this test completion mean? Like you are done, you report the bugs to the stakeholder whatsoever. Let's read it. Test completion activities collect data from the completed test activities to consolidate experience, test sphere, and any other relevant information. Like they get everything from the tester, their testing environment, test where to for the maintainability in the future, if it is done, everything. Test completion activities occur at a project milestone, such as when a software system is released, a test project is completed or cancelled. An agile project iteration is finished, a test level is completed, maintenance release has been completed. Like it can be anything. Test completion activity, it could be at the end of a complete project. Then you have test wares, test management, maintenance test suites. You will keep it. Test environment you will keep. Maybe in future when you need to enhance that product, or you get some feedback from the customer, you have to retest it. So you have to keep the environment ready. Like you don't need to design the environment again. You have already tested it, released it, now save the environment in your archives. So this test completion could be a complete project or could be an iteration or milestone in agile development. This we will see in chapter number 2. So test completion include the following activities: checking whether all the defects report have closed, entering change request or product backlog item for any defect that remain unresolved at the time of execution. Like if we see that this was a defect and it has not been fixed during this release, so it will go to the backlog, and then we will see everything, how many test cases are passed, are failed or blocked. Creating test summary report to be communicated to stakeholders. Like we also tell stakeholders about the test summary. Like we give the complete summary. These were the requirements from the test basis. These are being tested, these are being not tested, everything we take them in confidence. Finalizing and archiving the test environment, test data, test infrastructure, and other testware of the later reviews. For example, your product is complete, completely tested, completely released. But maybe in future, when you get a feedback from the customer that there was a bug, you need to retest again. So for that retesting, will you again design your test environment, test data, infrastructure, and everything? No, you will archive it after test completion. You will simply archive it and keep it in your library or somewhere else, wherever you want. Whenever you get a feedback, you need to retest. You will take it out and environment, everything is ready. Simply run the test cases. Handing over the testware to the maintenance team. If the product is released, you have to define some, like to the maintenance team. For example, there is a bug and they need to test it again, so they should have some handy test cases that if this fault occur, I should test in that way. So testware actually is for the maintenance team, for the future activities. If they get some fault, they have quick test cases ready. They simply execute them and get the quick feedback. It is known as testware for the maintenance team. Other project team or the stakeholder who could benefit from its use. Maybe your customer needs to rerun the test on some of the modules, so you will provide him the test cases. Analyzing lessons learned from the completed test activities to determine changes needed for future iterations. Release, like it is also a part of test completion that you learn the lessons, like how the activities were planned, and then you improvise them, and then you in the future project you implement them. Using the information gathered to improve test process maturity. Even you can, your system is being now is developing, so it can be used to mature your test process for the upcoming projects. So what are the work product for my test completion? Test completion work product include test summary report, as I told you, action item for improvement of subsequent project or iteration, change request or backlog item, product backlog. Maybe there are some change requests from the customer. You will also get this during test completion. And finalize testware. If it is done, everything is done, then you will make some testwares for the maintenance team. So now in the last phase, we are on the last step, and it is step number 7, which is C, PMADIEC. It is test completion. What we have in test completion? We have, most important thing is test summary report, and then maybe you have some change requests, you can say, and then maybe you have some finalized testwares. These are the common work products from test completion. So here we are done with the 7 activities of test process, test planning, PMADIEC: planning, monitoring and control, analysis, design, implementation, execution and completion. Maybe in some of the projects they will be continuously repeating and repeating again for each iteration. And so now for this video we will cover this last small topic, and in the next video we will cover the psychology of testing, which is a very small topic, and then we are done with chapter number 1. So this like here we are done with test activities. Lot of marking I have done here, and we are over here. You can note down your work products for the testing as well. For the test process, now we will read the last topic, how there is a traceability between test basis and test web. As I told you, test basis is your base for testing. Over there you will have from test basis you will drive your requirement, you will drive your test conditions whatsoever. As mentioned in section 1.4.3, test work products and the name of those work product vary significantly. Like work product could be vary. In one company you are seeing it specifications, in other company you are seeing it software requirement specifications. Name could be different. Regardless of this variation, in order to implement effective test monitoring and control, it is important to establish and maintain traceability throughout the test process between each element of test basis and the various test product associated with that element. Like you should have a traceable system. From a test basis you have some test base, and then you have a different work products, and you tell them this work product is derived from this test base and this test case is fulfilling this requirement as described above. In addition to the evaluation of test coverage, good traceability supports analyzing the impact of changes. Like for example, if you have changed something in your code, then you know that this requirement was tested by test case number 1. So if there is a change, then you can change your test case to verify, analyze the impact of the change. If you don't have any traceability, you don't know this requirement number 1 is linked to that part of the code, and this test case is checking this requirement. So if this code is changed, you know this requirement could be modified, so you need to change your test cases to verify this code, so you can analyze the impact, making testing auditable. Like your testing could be auditable, you can audit it with each release. You know that you have like you can someone can audit it, like this requirement is tested with this test case, this requirement with the test case, so it should be auditable. Meeting IT governance criteria. Sometimes there are some standards in IT that every requirement should be tested and should be covered, so traceability also plays a role over there. Improving understandability of test progress report and test summary report to include the status of element of test basis, e.g. requirement that pass their test, requirement that failed, requirement that have pending test. Like if you have a traceability, you can tell that this requirement is passed, this is failed, and this is blocked. Relating the technical aspects of testing to stakeholder in terms they can understand. Like you tell them these requirements have been verified through test cases, this requirement has not been verified. So then providing information to assess product quality, process capability, and project progress against business goal. You can also provide information to your stakeholders about the quality. If all the requirements are tested, all the test cases are passed, then product quality is quite good. But if not, then there is some issues. Some test management tools provide test work product model that match part or all of the test work product outlined in the section. There are some tools which continuously track this work product is fulfilling this requirement of test basis. Normally we use those tools. Requirement tools are very famous in industry. Some organization build their own management system to organize the work product and provide the information traceability they require. So friends, here we are done with the section 1.4. Now in the next video we will see the section 1.5, which is about the psychology of testing. It's a very easy topic, and then we are done with chapter number 1. But don't forget, never forget, the main term which I told you is test planning, monitoring, and control, you can say as well, analysis, test design, implementation, execution, and completion. And all of their work products I have put them here. You can have a look. My handwriting is quite bad, or I am not good with the graphic tablet. Unfortunately, I am not used to it, but it will help you a lot. So friends, for this video it was everything. Until next video, take care and bye.